Hello, everybody. We have a few more people coming in. Yeah. Thank you all for coming to this side event on the challenges of the Arctic energy mix. I'm Øystein Jansen. I'm the academic director of the European Academy's hub for the Nordic and polar regions, located at the University of Bergen. Academia Europaea, which is coordinating this in collaboration with other organizations, is the pan-European science academy. And one of our main tasks is to connect science and policy in important topics. And the pressing issues of the green transition is one of the topics that we follow. We've just had the COP28 meeting stating that we should transition away from fossil fuels. But how this is to be done and how fast it can be done and will it be done is another issue. We still have growing CO2 emissions. Temperature is continuing to increase. We have not seen a downtrend in the CO2 emissions so far. And all the targets, I think, for all countries in terms of emission cuts and mitigation measures will not be met, it seems, by 2030 and are postponed also, basically as we speak, in some countries. So this complex issue of the energy transformation is an example of the tough choices the world is facing and how the green transition can happen and how can it be effective and how can it be acceptable. So this case up here in northern Norway is, I think, or we think, is a good example of the dilemmas we are facing in doing this. So that's why we are focusing on this for this side event, and we are very happy to have very nice speakers on the issue. There have been a few changes, and Ole will tell a bit more about them because of illness, and there have been some transportation problems, but I think most of them, those are solved, even though people came late at night to Tromsø. So then I'll give the word over to Ole Øvretveit, who will manage the next part of this session.
Øystein. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ole Øvretveit, and I'm the project director of a pilot in the town of Kirkenes on the Russian border, and this pilot is called the Coastal Development Center, or the Coastal Impact Center, as a concept or an idea that was brought to the local development company in Sør-Varanger from NTNU, and where the concept is to build a bridge between science, technology on the one side, and local developers' processes on the other side. Should I maybe change the microphone and try this one? Sorry about that. It sounds better now, right? Okay, good. Yeah, so this is a pilot project that we have up there, and of course that means I live in Finnmark now. I live in Kirkenes, and I see the challenges that follows a deficit of electric power or power in general, and how that affects jobs, industry development and job creation, and how that in in the next step affects people wanting to stay and live and thrive in Finnmark. So these two challenges where we have deficits, which is talent and terawatt, is sort of very, I think, make a good picture of the challenges that Finnmark is facing. And of course, it's a region that is struggling with the effects of a more general centralization that the Norwegian periphery and the Arctic periphery is experiencing. We are working on electric power projects, trying to establish, on the one hand, a network for establishing small-scale green power installation and power plants in the regions that can sort of lift the general power input into the system. And also we are working to prepare the local industry for what might come in the not so far future, but still some years ahead, the potential of having the Barents Sea as an offshore wind area. And if that should be the case, then Kirkenes would have a very strong position. Okay, I will move on now to the speaker, the first speaker that has anything of real substance as far as science and knowledge goes on the technology side to bring to the discussion here. Jonas Christian Nøland is Associate Professor of Energy Conversion at the Norwegian University of Technology and Science. So please, Jonas, take the floor.
Hello. Du hører meg? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share some minutes with you. What I want to share today. Are we getting the slides up and running? Not this one, maybe? Am I presenting on behalf of NHO? You haven't gotten it? No. Okay. This is the one presentation I got. Okay. So, do you have one? Yes, I have. So. Yeah. Maybe could we change and someone else can start and.
Yeah. I think, yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Lars-Henrik, can you step in?
Yep.
Okay, I'm really sorry about that. That was some error in the production here. So our deepest apologies now. But then Lars-Henrik Mikkelsen from the Norwegian Climate Foundation will step in. And Lars-Henrik, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You know, when you invite the minister and he sends his advisor, that's the feeling I'm having now. You know, you're waiting for this keynote and you're stuck with me. But thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Lars-Henrik Mikkelsen. I'm the director of the Norwegian Climate Foundation, a green think tank in Norway. We call ourselves Norway's green think tank. So we are the only national NGO working on climate issues that is not headquartered in Oslo. So I'm based in Bergen, but we have a district office in Oslo and in Brussels. Let me just find my manuscript. I don't have a presentation, and perhaps that was good, but But I've written some reflections, which was supposed to be like the after the keynote in the beginning. But my first reflection is very short and very straightforward. And I have been working with climate change issues for quite some time. And for a long time, we've been talking about the climate and energy transition as something that belongs to the future. But recently, I've just realized that we are actually now just in the middle of this transition. It's happening right here and right now. And it's a bumpy road, and it's difficult. You have opposition, but I think that will also be what we have to be used to when it comes to changing, transforming the society in a very, very short time of period. And Melkøya, as a case, is an illustration and a reminder of that. As a country, Norway are in a situation where we need to cut greenhouse gas emissions extremely fast. You know, this is the situation everywhere, but if you look at the graph, you will see that the emissions are nearly at the same level as the 1990s. And we have a target of reducing the emissions by more than 50% by 2030. So you can do the math yourself. That's a big, big challenge. And Melkøya, that was, when I checked, the 5th largest industrial emission site in Norway. So when you are going to reduce that much emissions that we are in the next 6-7 years, you simply cannot afford to just leave those big emitters alone. You have to address them. And the politicians in Norway, they had 2 alternatives when it comes to Melkøya. The one was to deal with the emissions, to address the emissions and get the right measures in place. The second was to decide that, okay, we will shut down the LNG plant earlier than planned. That could be an alternative approach. And now we know the conclusions. The politicians, they decided to address the emissions through electrification. From my point of view, I would like to see that we also discussed the future of oil and gas industry. Because it is a fear from my side that when you remove the emissions from the production of LNG, you have dealt with the problem, because the combustion emissions, they are not visible in Norway. So you could fear that this will extend the life of the oil and gas industry. But that was not the case. And I also believe perhaps that the government should have pushed Equinor to do more, to come up with some alternative solutions. But I think that would have required they started this earlier than they did. But I'm not a big fan of rematches, that be in football or in politics. So I believe that when the decision has been made, I think we now should go ahead with the electrification. And it's everyone knows that Melkøya, that will increase the demand of electrification. But I think it's an illusion to believe that the discussions about new power plants or new transmission lines in the north would not, that we could avoid these discussions if the government had come up with another conclusion regarding Melkøya. And I think what you said in the beginning, that's underlines that my point. Melkøya is one big source of emissions, but at the same time, it's only one of many sources of emissions. And still, 50% of all the energy used in Norway comes from fossil fuels. And that's the main challenge. And we know that the best alternative to oil, gas, and coal, that is electricity, directly or indirectly through, for instance, hydrogen or ammonia in shipping. So the question is, where should all this electricity come from? Well, here's one of my main points. That depends on the time perspective that you have. It's a big difference between 2030 and 2040 that's what I believe. And we will hear about technology neutrality, and I believe that that is important, at least in principle. And I think it's wrong by Norway, by Norwegian politicians, to reject nuclear power as a solution in Norway indefinite. At the same time, I think it's wrong to mix nuclear power into today's debate on how should we meet the electricity demand in, say, the next 10, 15 years. Because it's not available. You cannot go to IKEA and buy an SMR. It's not available. But it may be in the future at a reasonable cost. We don't know. But that's why the time perspective is so important when we are discussing these things. So, for the next 15 years, I believe the best solutions are, of course, energy efficiency. When it comes to production technologies, it will be hydropower, onshore wind, and solar at a national level. When we approach 2040, the market will look completely different, the electricity market, than what we have today. Perhaps the cheapest and best available electricity in 2040 will be floating offshore wind. Perhaps it's small nuclear reactors. We don't know. Or perhaps it's something completely different, something that is not on our radar at all today. Personally, I've become quite fascinated lately by the work being done by different authorities around the world and scientific communities on space-based solar, a way of 24/7 solar energy from space. So yes, because we don't know, it's very important that in the long term we keep our doors open to whatever that will be available in the future. That does not mean that Norway should play an active role in developing all possible future technologies. Norway, we have already committed ourselves to contribute to developing offshore wind, and politicians and companies are pointing to floating wind as the big possibility window in the future, while other countries, they're committed to nuclear, for instance, and other technologies. Many of you know that at COP28 meeting in Dubai before Christmas, the parties agreed to triple the renewable energy capacity. What is less known is that 20 countries from more than 4 continents also agreed that they would contribute to tripling the global nuclear energy capacity, not by 2030, by 2050, which is a quite important message. And among them is Sweden. And for me, this is a sensible way of division of labor. We can contribute to offshore wind, Sweden on nuclear power, and then we'll see. And then we'll stick to the technologies that are best available when it comes to costs and conflicts. While keeping the long-term perspective, it's important that we also keep in mind that we cannot rely on offshore wind or nuclear power to meet today's increased electricity demand. That means also that we cannot run away from a question like, is it possible to build more wind power on land while at the same time taking care of nature and respecting rights of indigenous people? This is not something we can run away from. It's difficult, but we have to address it. If the answer is no, we have a big problem. But also, if the answer is yes, we know that it comes with some costs, and we must be honest about that. Finally, regardless of what the future brings, what technology that will be available, we must remember that they will all come with costs and there will be conflicts related to them. So we should not hide and imagine that the future always looks brighter, so we should go to something that we don't know so much because we want to avoid today's difficult discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars Henrik. And now we are getting back on track, and I'm very glad to invite Jonas Christian Nøland again back up. And this time, hopefully, we have the presentations and everything ready. So please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for a very nice introduction to the topic. I think it was even broader and more comprehensive than mine. So, yeah. I will just say a little bit about a project that we have at NTNU, just briefly. Here you see different energy sources. So our approach is more that it's good that we embrace competition between different solutions. Of course, it can be painful to not be declared as the winner beforehand, but we think that competition is good. And we also think that even though these solutions are competing, we also believe that they can complement each other and that a robust and resilient energy mix can be a good path forward. And of course, it's always a talk about different time frames and so on. You know, as mentioned, offshore wind and nuclear energy will not contribute to 2030 goals. So that is also a very important for both politicians and stakeholders to understand that we will also cut emissions after 2030. And cutting emissions after 2030 will not be easier than before 2030, because before 2030 we will try to realize the low-hanging fruits. And after 2030, we will only have the high-hanging fruits left. That's cutting emissions in hard-to-abate sectors and so on. And there, we believe that hydrogen and nuclear energy, and potentially also offshore wind, can contribute to cut emissions in hard-to-abate sectors, and also make it possible to not only reach a certain reduction in emissions, but actually the whole way down to net zero. So we need to take responsibility, shorthand, but we also need to take responsibility for the whole race. And if we believe that we are in a, let's say, in a climate match, as we say in Norway, a klimakampen, we want to go into that match with all players. Of course, it can be hurtful. Let's say, if the 11th player can get on board the pitch, right? Because the 10 other players can feel that some of the attention will be taken away from them, right? But if you have a full team, it's much more easier to address the challenges we have ahead. If we have the toughest match ever in history, we don't want to have a full team. I think that is quite risky. First, I will just show a little bit about offshore wind. Me and my colleague, we had this research paper in Nature Scientific Reports in October, where we looked at what are the most beneficial places to place offshore wind in Norway. And what you can see here, we have two scenarios. One, we have a scenario where we have an isolated scenario without interconnections. And we have another scenario where we have with interconnections, interconnecting with the rest of Europe. And what you can see here is that because of the wind production profile in the north, you see that both scenarios, the northern areas, has higher value than the southern areas. So that's important to understand, because it seems like because wind power is much cheaper in southern areas, people are much focusing on that, and it seems to have forgotten, let's say, the benefits of northern regions. So that's something to consider. We have also a scenario from DNV, which is ordered by Norwegian industry. One of my main criticisms of this scenario is that they think that all of offshore wind should go to merely hydrogen production and export. But I also want to directly electrify and to build up value creation locally instead of just having export. So that's the reason why I kind of criticize this scenario, because I want a scenario where we have more direct electrification, higher round-trip energy efficiency. We can increase the value of, let's say, hydropower and other sources, and to focus on electrification as well. Was mentioned the Melkøya case. So it's clear that if you look at wind power production in northern Norway in 2022, we see that it's up and down, and Melkøya is a very good case of a base load consumption. So it will not be affordable to, let's say, just run down the production when the prices are high and run it up when the prices are low. You can maybe save some money by doing that, but you will ruin your whole business anyway. So, so yeah, this is just to show like the challenges that just focusing on wind power can play a role in an energy mix, but not alone. And that's what we see here, that if we have the whole energy demand met by wind power, we see that there's a period of the year where you have overproduction, much more than Melkøya needs, and then you have another period of a year on the right-hand side where you need to have replacement. So that means that you need to, overproduction needs to be exported to other places, and the underproduction you need to import. So that's just to try to illustrate the challenges. And what we see in Finnmark is that Finnmark has what you call a power adequacy problem, which Statnett claims. And the way they are trying to address this is to have much more power lines and imports from other places, even in Sweden and in more mid-Norway, where you have much more energy security. And we see also that the plans in the latest edition of Statnett's report, we see that there's a lot of interest in, let's say, data centers, and a lot of so-called baseload power consumption facilities, but so far it's mostly wind power that is considered locally, like non-firm solutions. You need something to firm it up. You have some non-dispatchable hydropower there. So it's kind of like the same as Denmark. You know, Denmark has a lot of wind and a lot of they have a lot of needs from all the countries around them to supply them with energy security. So, yeah. So my question is like, could you open up for alternative solutions or a mix that could make it more easy to have more security locally? You know, we can have extreme dry years in the future due to climate change. You have little wind and also little water inflow into the water magazines of the hydropower plants around this area. So, like, are we prepared to also deal with these extreme years? Should we also focus on solutions that are firm and not weather dependent? So, So just to and overall, we see that secondary industry in Norway, that is the biggest baseload power consumption. That's about 7 gigawatts. That's about 60 to 70 terawatt hours per year. So it's about half of the Norwegian electricity consumption. And if we're gonna decarbonize in the futures, there is a need to actually increase this type of consumption. So we need to have that in mind, that we need to have a mix that can actually meet this, to also decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors that need to have this firm power delivery. So that is my... So therefore, I ask if nuclear energy can be part of the solution. If nuclear energy can come in, you could have backbone for the hydropower, so that you can utilize the dispatchable power from hydropower much more, and you can even integrate more wind power in the system. So that's my kind of the hypothesis of our project, to just show that it is actually possible to realize nuclear power close to the Western world. We have an example of a country, the United Arab Emirates, who actually realized 45 terawatt hours of electricity and much more heat in addition in just about 10 years. And they didn't go for a prototype reactor with not mature design. They chose a well-proven technology. And the whole design was finished before they started the construction. And that led them to actually finish on time and cost, and they were able to cut costs half for the last reactor. And actually, the first reactor was lower than the cost level that NVE has set, and the last one was half of that. So it is actually, if we are interested in knowing how even nuclear power can be done well, but if we aren't interested in how it can be done well, it will be a lost opportunity. And also another benefit of nuclear is more the long-term perspective, because much of the solution that we set up today will cut emissions on the short term, but they will not cut emissions necessarily in 2050. So here you have a nuclear power plant has like a 60-year lifetime, and you can lifetime extend it 2 times for 20 years, up to 100 years. So it's more similar to the hydropower build-outs in Norway. In the hydropower build-outs in Norway, we had some problems in the beginning because it's a big upfront investment. But what is happening, even though the net present value today is maybe not so good, after you have paid down the power plant, the net present value for future generation will be extraordinarily high. It's actually the same story for hydropower. Like, while the economists said like 50 years ago that this is not a business case for it at all, now they say that hydropower is the most cost-effective energy source we have. So it's kind of like also the perspective of future generation. And that's the reason why I asked, like, could nuclear power also be a solution to also make climate investments for the future to ensure future generations and intergenerational justice? This is the hypothesis we have, that hydropower today, much of hydropower is taking up the base load. But hydropower has a lot of properties that can be realized if nuclear could be placed on the bottom to make hydropower more dispatchable and make it easier for hydropower to play more with intermittent non-firm sources like solar and wind. So therefore we come up with more like in the NTVA publication recently, we came up with this technology neutral scenario where we look at the mix of hydropower, wind power and nuclear power to increase the societal value of hydropower and increase the share of dispatchable power to have energy security, and also have a higher round-trip efficiency by having more direct electrification, and not necessarily as in the DNV scenario where most of the offshore wind, in their opinion, should only be used for hydrogen production. I'm not against hydrogen production, but we also need to focus on direct electrification, because that is the first focus we should have. And then hydrogen can be used in hard-to-abate sector as a secondary solutions. And also there is a historical, in the end, just to mention, there is a historical footprint here that we know that if all solutions can play, maybe the decarbonization can get faster. Maybe if it's the case like what it happened in Sweden and France, if nuclear as a complementary solution to the other ones can make scaling up electrification, the decarbonization faster, then actually it can get faster and as fast as it's happened in the 1970s. And if you look at the Energiewende in Germany, which is more like a non-technology neutral approach, we see that it wasn't the case that you cut 5% emissions and then the next 5% will be easier. No, it will be harder. And then when you cut 5% more, it will be even harder. So having in mind that it will not get easier, it will get harder and harder, and realizing that makes the case for actually looking at the benefits of all solutions in the whole picture. So that was my take. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jonas, for that very insightful and interesting presentation. Eystein mentioned that we had some small alterations in the program, and unfortunately, Anne Ingeborg Myhr from Norse is called sick, so she will not be able to join us today. But then we are moving on to the industry perspective on this issue, and I'm very glad to invite the director of the regional Arctic office of the Confederation of Norwegian Enterprise, NHO, which is covering Troms, Finnmark and Svalbard, to the podium. So please, Sigrid Ina Simonsen, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Ole, and thanks for the invite to talk about Kraftløftet. I'm going to present Kraftløftet. That was my invite, and it's a very big thing for us in NHO, but also from the union side, as you can see from the slide. LO Norge is also part of this work, so I'll come back to the details. But how do I do this? Wow, it's easy. So Norway has always been at the forefront of connecting industry, climate, and power. And we are now seeing that the countries around us are stepping up their work, and at the same time the EU's climate targets are puts clear guidelines to what we must achieve to be part of the industry also in Europe. And even though we are, as a nation, well positioned, the comprehensive energy and climate adaptation, the Europe's planning will be hugely significant for an export-oriented energy and industrial nation like Norway. Employers and trade unions have a tradition of cooperating to find good solutions in common challenges at the individual workplace, but also regarding framework conditions given at the national level. And in 2023, we initiated what we called Kraftløftet to make sure Norway can keep its advantage as an energy nation. And we have used the government's climate targets as a basis for our work. Many analyses show that Norway's potential has, the Norwegian enterprises has the potential to be part of the energy and climate adaptation. And Norway is already one of the most electrified countries in Europe. And as you can see, we have connected this work in Kraftløftet to also NHO's roadmap for the Norwegian industries from 2020 to 2030. If you go back in time and see historically what has happened in Norway, we see that the energy transition 100 years ago has made us the second highest share of renewables in Europe. We are the world's 7th largest hydropower producer, and we're also world leader in aluminum and fertilizer production. And we have cornerstone businesses in many communities, which also goes for the northern part of Norway. If you go back 50 years ago, we started the oil adventure, what we call in Norway, and that has made us the largest gas supplier to Europe as we speak. We are also one of the world's largest offshore markets, and this again has made ripple effects along the entire Norwegian coast, and Melkøya was a big example mentioned earlier, providing significant amount of jobs, not only in Hammerfest, but also in the whole region. And we are one of the world's largest funds, as you all know, and we own 1.5% of all listed shares in the world. And this also, of course, gives us an opportunity to be leading in the energy transition. And the potential for the future energy transition is, of course, new industrial opportunities with high export value and also employment. Increased competitiveness for existing businesses in a market with stricter climate requirements. Our goal is that Norwegian businesses are in the forefront in making new solutions and adapting to climate restrictions. We also have complied to emission cuts as a nation, and this is something that we are going to be delivering on from the industry side as well. And we want to strengthen the ties to our trading partners with the solutions that they need. If we go 5 years back in time, nobody really talked about the energy transition, not like we do today. And I'm actually really glad that we have started this debate, and that also different kind of energy systems and productions types are included in the discussion. But one of the most important and challenging thing at the moment is to actually agree on what does the world look like? What does Norway look like? And we have had a lot of reports, different reports from different sectors, showing the need and the potential in each sector. What we lacked was a total amount of information. And that's why we also, when we started looking at Norway as a whole, made Kraftløftet. It's actually a combination of the solutions and the potentials and the possibilities in the whole country, but we have also regional reports for each region. And there is a request for power corresponding to the entire day's power consumption in Norway. Many companies, the last 2 years, that want network connections are now being turned down, and that was actually quite shocking when it happened 1 year ago. We had almost 40 different companies in northern Norway alone that the Statnett had to turn down their applications. And only 1/3 of the newly requested power consumption has been accommodated. And this is, of course, due to the climate the goals, and also the market's requests. So the Energy Commission's recommendation to increase power supply by 60 terawatt hours over the next 10 years must be the bottom line, and that's also what we have included in Kraftløftet. If you look at how it's regionally, if we focus now on northern part of Norway, we see that if we look at today's balance, we have a surplus. Giving the reserved consumption and the production, we are in Troms and Finnmark already in a deficit. Nordland has a slight surplus still. But if we look at all the consumptions and looking at the planned production for our region, we are at a huge deficit for all part of Norway, or all part of northern Norway. And this is, of course, also a challenge for doing the local adjustments when we cannot look to our neighboring county, where should we get the power from. what we historically have done is import the power from northern Sweden, for instance, and also Finland. But given their industrial plans in the northern part of those countries, that is not possible also within 2030. So in the Kraftløftet, we have put some main recommendations down. And we have to understand that the time to 2030 is short. We need to do something now, and we cannot, by including discussions about potential new energy sources, just postpone what we actually can do something about. And we need to also understand that all the municipalities, all the politicians, all the businesses, everybody needs to be aligned with this, and we need to contribute. And the effort must be framed with an overall and concrete plan for the implementation of a national power lift. The power and network developments depend on good cooperation between business, local authorities, and environmental interests. And we need the authorities to balance out and must facilitate solutions that can be made, also put down locally. And that's why also in Kraftløftet we have some selected topics that we highlight. First of all, more renewable power. Summarized, we are saying, if you look at the different energy solutions that we have today in Norway, we say that we need to increase the power production in hydropower by 10 terawatt-hours, a minimum of +8 terawatt-hours of solar power, up to 10 terawatt-hours of wind power on land, and then we are pointing at offshore wind as a big potential. And as we know, this is not something that we in Norway have a lot of at the moment, but there are industrial plans. And I'm absolutely agreeing that the northern part of Norway has big potentials also in offshore wind. And then we have to increase the district heating production by 2 to 4 terawatt-hours. These are things that we can actually do something about at the moment. And but it's not easy. Even though we can do it, we need to agree that this is something that we want to actually support. The next issue, and we see that in northern part of Norway especially, it's the grid capacity. It's too poor grid capacity, and it's a security issue in northern part of Norway. As we speak, we have a storm going on, and the one thing that everybody's focused on is how is the power supply. And we see every time there is a storm or a bad weather conditions, some of the areas in Norway are knocked down because of lack of power. So we need to have more resilience in the power grid, and we also need to know that the energy that we produce can be transported out to where the energy is needed. For instance, in fisheries, in transportation, and in the seafood industry. One other thing with Norway, when you talk about transportation, is that we haven't even started a plan for how we're going to decrease emissions from the transport sector. And I firmly believe that the road along the coastline, offshore or by sea is one way. But we are not at the moment, we do not have the infrastructure needed for those. And then, of course, something that is really, really, really important, and we need to stress that also much more, increasing energy efficiency. We need to use the power that we can produce much smarter and in a more efficient way. So that's why we also have made an entire strategy for energy efficiency and a local production of solar power. And this also actually requires some regulatory changes in Norway. I'm just mentioning it. My time is running out. I'm not sure if, yeah. You said I had a little more time, so. But it's important to show that also the industry is interested in making this happen. And if you take the construction industry, this is a really exciting business area as well. And of course, when looking at export value of Norwegian businesses, I think this is something that we need to stress. But if I have to be honest, in northern part of Norway, our members are about 2,200 in total, and 96% of them are less than 50 employees, and 70% are less than 10. And of course, that means that you are hesitating to be in the front line of new solutions. So the regulations from Norwegian governments need to be, and also the support that you can have financially from the governments, they need to be fitting for small and medium-sized businesses. So as I mentioned, we have regional reports, and that's the presentation on Kraftløftet. But just because I know that nuclear power is a big thing, I need to say just a few words about that as well. We as NHO, and also with Kraftløftet, we have not ruled out nuclear power as a long-term solution also in Norway. But we think it's important to stress the time and the need for urgency at the moment. So if the discussion about nuclear power takes away the focus on what we can actually achieve to reach the climate goals, we think we need to be staying on the right focus. And there are a lot of things to be done, and as I'm sure the panel later will look into. So I think it's important to think about what we historically have done when we have included the work making more renewable, making power in Norway, combining that goal with making jobs all over the country. It's really, really important to make sure that we can make jobs from our power consumption in all part of Norway. So with that, I thank you for the attention. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sigurina. So we've had interesting perspectives and knowledge from science and climate NGOs and industry perspectives now, and I think that will make a good foundation for the panel that we will move into now. And I'm very glad to have editor-in-chief at Nordlyst, the largest newspaper here in northern Norway, to be moderating it. So on that note, I'm just giving the stage to you, Helge Nitteberg.
Thank you so much, Ole. We will get the table, yeah. So please let me introduce the main persons now, the panelists. Please say welcome to Gunn-Britt Retter, Head of Arctic Environmental Unit in the Sami Council. And we already met Jonas Christiansen Nøland, Associate Professor of Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Please give him a hand. And then we have Lars Henrik Porup Mikkelsen, Director of Norwegian Climate Foundation. And then we have Geir Voldsæter, Special Advisor in Fagforbundet Industry Energy, the trade union. And then we have Sigurd Rafaelsen, Mayor of Lebesby Municipality in Finnmark for the Labour Party. So Jonas first. We are running out of time to find good solutions. How do you see the need for power in Finnmark and the northern part of Norway developing in the short term and as we approaching 2030, 2040?
Yeah, I see that there are big challenges, of course. You have, as mentioned here, we have solutions more into time after 2030 that can solve some problems. But we have also some challenges here and now, let's say for like grid build-outs, which can also take a decade or more. So it's unfortunate that we have this, let's say, challenging timeline to address our goals, but still most of the solutions have the challenges to deliver in time.
How critical is the situation?
I think that, yeah, like, let's say if we don't, let's say, maybe we reach some goals in 2030, but we don't reach everything, we shouldn't give up, and we should also have an idea to prepare for situations. Let's say if we don't succeed so much as we hope in the short term, that we at least plan to succeed even better in the longer term. But of course, succeeding more in the long term should not be a way to not do anything in the short term. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Over to you, Sigurd Rafaelsen. You're the mayor of Lebesby municipality. What? Yeah. We have the sound. What are the consequences of a long-term power deficit in Finnmark for you?
It's a decrease in population, and our businesses won't be able to transform in the green shift, and then we will lose in the markets. So of course it's dramatic for us if we can't create more power to the industries and keep the prices down as well. So this is a major conflict for us, because we need to solve this, and we have the resources. We have the wind. We have the best wind in Norway. We have sea wind resources on land. And we've always come to good conclusions when it turns to development, and we have conflicts, but we've always solved them. So I have the belief that we can do so also in the future.
What is the main dilemma for you?
The main dilemma for me is that the processes are taking too long time. At first, when it comes to creating new green energy, you stop the whole process with wind power. And now you opened it and you changed the regime, and now you don't know how to start. So that's a part of the problem, because in terms of conflicts, if things take a very long time, you don't get the decision. Of course, the conflict will increase. So we have to make decisions. That's a part of keeping the conflict low, and you have to have respect that there are conflict of interests.
How did you react on the news with Melkøya when your Prime Minister from the same party as yours gave us the news?
I think it was very good, because it solves the need for energy in the eastern part of Finnmark. It also gives communities in Finnmark the possibility to prosper, because for us wind power is a possibility to make a sustainable society. It's a possibility to have more income to the municipality, so that we can provide better infrastructure to the fisheries, to the sea farming, and we get more activity, so our roads becomes more important. So everyone that travels through our municipality will have a more safer road. So everything as activity creates activity, and that is important for us to preserve our culture, because if there are none of us left, there is no culture, and that is important to have in mind.
Thank you. Mikkelsen, the electrification of Melkøya will be done out of climate considerations. How do we find the right balance in the trilemma of growth, nature, and climate considerations? Please have the microphone.
Yeah. Even though I'm from Bergen, I cannot speak that loud. No, I think I agree with much of what you said, but I think we also must agree on that we also have a new element that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. That is, we also have a nature crisis. And as many of us have been looking at the news lately, we can see how slowly by slowly, project by project, we are building down nature's possibility to store carbon, but also to we lose biodiversity. So we also must do when we are proceeding with projects, we must do it in a different way than we used to do. So we cannot only look at the past, we must do it in a completely different way, because we cannot afford to build down much more nature. So I think a way of addressing the conflicts is to look at, okay, where do we already have built infrastructure, for instance? Where have you, well, you know, we talk about gray areas where you don't have like virginal nature. I think that's where you should start. And when we go ahead with new projects, and the solutions in short term is onshore wind, if you want to produce more electricity in the short term, mainly. But it's also a matter of transmission lines, because in northern part of Norway, you have several areas where you have a lot of production, but that's not where the biggest consumption is. And that's why you also have to discuss not only production, but also transmission lines, which are also causing interests, conflicts.
Rafaelsen.
I agree with when it comes to nature, and then you have to see what kind of land use do you want? Do you want us to build cabins in the south, or do you want us to provide new renewable energy in the north and keep sustainable societies that we need also in the security situation? And then you also have to take into account the nature values that you have, and also there Finnmark is on the positive side because of our nature, because of the geography. So that's very important to take into account. You can solve both crises, because the climate crisis is also a part of the nature crisis. And it's possible the biggest threat to nature that we have the climate change. So solving the climate change is also solving the nature crisis.
Nolan, please.
So I think this is a very interesting topic, and it also addresses this the name of the event, at what costs, because now we see like the interest conflict between nature cost and economic cost, because like let's say if Lars Haltbrekken's declaration that large wind farm developmental history is over, if he's right about that, that means that if we can't build large wind turbines anymore, if we can't build large wind farms anymore, the cost of wind power will increase radically. So we also need to think about the interest of having a profitable wind industry, and at the same time think about the cost of nature, and that's a very, very big dilemma.
Okay, Retter, you were, please give her the microphone. You were nodding while Mikkelsen were talking. So you represent the Sami Council, and if the new energy need after Melkøya electrification will come from wind on land, a lot of land in Finnmark must be occupied for windmill parks. What might be the reactions from the Sami community if that happens?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wouldn't call it parks. That sounds so cozy. There are apparently many ways to paint a picture of the realities. And I hear what several of these panelists are saying about also taking care of nature and taking care of climate change. But I think it's a very complicated picture. We are living in a times of multiple crises, a climate crisis and a nature crisis, where loss of intact nature and ecosystems is immense. Also in Norway, as we have seen in TV recently. And my perspective comes, even though I live in Unjarg, Nesseby by the Varangerfjord, I come into this debate from a more international perspective of what we are working on internationally. So Sami, as indigenous people, we depend on climate-sensitive ecosystems for our basic needs and for the continued survival of our cultures, languages, and livelihoods. And that is still the case, even though many of us have paid jobs, like I do and other Sami in this room do. But the climate and environmental change and land destruction poses an existential threat to many indigenous peoples globally and the Sami as well. And it has so many impacts on our traditional ways of life and also our health. On top of this, the response measures to mitigate or adapt to climate change and transition to low-emission societies based on renewable energy are sought placed on our lands and territories, adding the burden on already stressed ecosystem. And I was saying that the man and humans are part of those ecosystems. And particularly looking to Finnmark, which is a discussion here today. So that is why all these initiatives must be consistent with indigenous people's rights. So that has to be the basis for any development. And I know I'm speaking very long and I have speaking notes. I came in late to this debate. But the big question is, and for us as well in Sami Council, there is definitely a need to reduce CO2 emissions. So the big question becomes, how do we move into these low emission societies, getting off fossil fuels and reduce emissions of greenhouse gases and transit to alternative energy sources without placing the burden of this shift on the indigenous peoples, and in this case on the Sami. And that is without compromising cultures that has been the ones that kept the ecosystems intact in the first place. So if people look to Finnmark and think it looks like a wilderness or intact nature, it's not, it is. It's not because it's untouched, it's because it's used and touched for 10,000 of years. That's why Finnmark looks like it does, and Troms and other areas as well. So all these aspects become an issue of human rights as indigenous peoples, and the question of at what cost, which is the point here. We did not save these lands for others to waste. Energy transition is not only to, and we're talking about energy transition, that should not just be a question of to transit from fossil fuels to other energy sources. It should also mean to transit from high energy consumption to less consumption. So that is also a transit that we need to discuss, how to consume less. And I have more points, but I hope I can get back to them afterwards.
Thank you. Rafaelsen, how can we meet this dilemma, the indigenous people and the community, and the need of power?
I think the municipalities have a good framework to do that. And today you have the law of consultation, you have the Plan and Building Act when you're building wind farms or wind parks. In Kjellefjord, it's you go hiking in the wind park. But I think you have to remember that Norway is a pioneer when it comes to indigenous rights. So we have wrongdoings in the past. We also have the Fosen case, which happens with the windmills in Fosen. But you have Berlevåg, you have Kjellefjord, you have Måsøy, you have Båtsfjord. There hasn't been a Fosen in Finnmark. You have had the developments in industry, in settlements all over, and you have an increase in reindeer population, an increase in industry. So the history shows us that we can do this. It is possible to coexist, and we have no other narrative than coexistence in Finnmark. So I think we can do it. I think we have to choose the right projects and have a good dialogue and have fact-based solutions. But you should always respect the initial stand. But we all have the responsibility to come to a solution, also to the climate change. And we who depend on nature also have great responsibility for the nature.
You sound quite optimistic.
Yes, I'm always optimistic. And of course, for me as a mayor in Lebesby, David Sida Gelda, it is important to take in our responsibility towards the Sami population, the Sami culture. That's a part of my responsibility, and we think about it in all we do, and it's a part of our commitment.
Short comment.
Yeah, very short comment. There are limits. The landmass in Finnmark doesn't grow or extend. So as you rightly said, there's already many projects in place, and there is not much more space.
Yeah, and also in respect to energy needs, I firmly believe that we can't reach net zero without having more clean energy. And the reason for that is you could mention like energy efficiency. There's a paradox there. Like if you insulate your house better and use less energy, then the human instinct is to just afford more energy, right? It's a paradox that some of the energy efficiency is ruled out with more comfort because of cheaper energy, because you use less. So there are some feedbacks there that makes it difficult to just deal with the net zero with just using less energy alone. And also the life standard, because like I don't believe in a democracy. Like in a democracy, we can't force people to go radically down in life standard. So that's also a challenge to just say that we need less energy. Of course, we should try to deal with overconsumption and like consumeristic attitudes in our societies. But there are also benefits with having an advanced economy, having a life standard. We stabilize populations, which we don't do in poorer nations. We don't have like wealthy nations that are energy poor. So we need to have a certain standard of living, also in a net zero clean world. So that is my pitch, that we really need to think about how we get clean energy in the future. Yes, it will be difficult to build out grids to firm up wind power. It will take maybe a decade as well. So also, maybe if there are some communities that can't have wind power, let's also open up for potential other solutions that maybe create less area conflicts. And there I think nuclear energy obviously is a good alternative. Let's also listen to what people want to have. That is my case. We make it very difficult for ourselves if we don't open up for the solutions people will have. It's 45 municipalities today that are interested in nuclear power. It's 2 municipalities that are interested in waste disposal. And yeah, so try to have democracy as part of the discussion when we try to make it easier in the energy transition.
Holsæter, please.
Yeah, so I think the biggest issue with Kraftløftet, the report, it essentially says we have to double our energy production in the north, in Finnmark and Troms, to even have a positive power balance. And the same goes for rest of Norway, and the same goes for Europe. A doubling of the energy production, electricity production, by 2040 in order to reach 2050 targets. So, of course, there's going to be trade-offs. But what we suffered for too long is that demand has come before production. And so when you don't prioritize production as heavy as demand, we run into these problems. It causes huge conflicts in society. And we're experiencing them here. But everybody agrees to cut emissions by using electricity. And then we can't seem to get together on producing the power that's required. And I think the first step we can do is to take the Kraftløftet report. Number 2, come up with a toolbox that actually ensures you can deliver the power you need. So the problem of increased demand is decided by politics, and it's only politics that can save the energy production that we need to solve the first problem.
How unique is this issue in a circumpolar perspective?
Oh, I think it's the same all over. If you look at Alaska, has 40% of its power production in natural gas. They have some hydro, some wind. But in rural communities, they run diesel generators, which is bad for the air, it's noisy, and so on. How can we secure that indigenous communities get clean power? That's issues they have. And Alaska is facing a power shortage unless they can get more natural gas in by 2027, 2028. So they have facing the same issues we are.
Mikkelsen, please.
You know, in a panel like this, it's very easy to agree that we all agree we should take care of this and that. But I think strategically, Norway is standing now at the crosspoint, strategic crosspoint. And that crosspoint is taking part in this region. And I think that's the Barents Sea. Because now we are talking about the green shift, as you said. We are talking about electricity, new green value chains, and so on. But you also know that a big part of NHO, LO, and your organization perhaps, are also very eager that we should invest even more in infrastructure, production offshore. And I'm afraid that we are talking a lot of, have seminars about green shift, while the big money, the most competent people among us, and the politicians, most of the political will, is investing and thinking of more oil and gas in the Barents Sea. If you look at the directorates, what they are writing, they are saying that this is the bank of Norway, the Barents Sea, when it comes to gas resources. This is a small warning that if you really, really think that we should be all man on deck in order to solve the climate crisis and get enough electricity, we should be aware of this strategic cross point that we are standing at right now.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I have some more points in my notes, but I also have to use my light bulb analogy. That is how the human brain is working. When I grew up, we had about 10 or 16 lights on the Christmas tree because that's what we could afford. And then we had to go via saving bulbs into, who are very like slow lightning and annoying, but then we went into LED lights. And then we have 1,000 light points on the Christmas tree. So people are not willing to reduce anything, like you also said, but because it's kind of energy friendly, you just add on. So, but the other thing I wanted to say is that I keep hearing that there's a decrease in the population in Finnmark, and that didn't start yesterday or in this millennia. In 1950, there was 1,500 inhabitants in my municipality, Onjarg Nesseby in eastern Finnmark. And I didn't have the time to check, but I'm sure the last 20 years we have been well under 1,000. So the decrease in population is not an issue that emerged now and that needs to be used as an argument to development. I think that is quite, well, I don't know what the English word is, far-fetched, yeah. I wanted to say some words about growth. The Second World War ended 80 years ago. After the war, there was a common understanding of the need to rebuild our societies, and the economic growth was a driving force. Now, 80 years after, I would claim we have rebuilt. Og vel så det. We are also far beyond the need for continuous growth. We are beyond the need for growth. So that is what the discussion should be about in Lebesby and other municipalities. And like you said, but you might contradict with democracy if I understood you right. We are at the verge of destruction of what the people before us rebuilt. We need to rethink the concept of growth. That should be the reaction to the crisis we live in. That is what the discussion should be about. Not more industrialization and destruction of land and seas. That is the intention with all the energy projects, because it's not just to cover our needs as inhabitants, it's to cover the need, as we heard, of more industrial projects. So I think that is what we need to discuss.
Short comment, please.
Yeah, in a way I agree. And I think you are right that we cannot not just add on and add on. And there is an international concept or framework called avoid, shift, and improve. And that should be the hierarchy that we also always should use when you are looking at climate solutions. But even though you stop growth, you still have a big job to do. And we will still need a lot of electricity. So 50% of all electricity from cars, industry, ferries, and land transport is still fossil fuels based. So even though we stopped development, stopped all economic growth, we would need more electricity. And that's the tough reality.
What's that there?
Yeah, so if we stopped growth now, there's no way we could do the green shift or reach climate targets. We need to double production of both aluminium and alloys to produce both windmills and batteries for cars. So there's really, even if oil and gas were no longer needed, you still need to provide transportation for people. And the industrial base that Norway has had over 100 years to produce alloys and metals, that needs to grow. And that is not a growth that's climate negative. That's growth that needs to happen both for employment, and in order to do that, you need electricity, and number two, affordable, competitive priced electricity.
Okay, Rafael, we're close to the end now before
Yeah.
we bring in the audience.
Yeah, I think the part of the decrease in population, it started long ago, and we can agree on that. But it's still happening. And if we don't do anything, then it will be me and you sitting there, and with no kids. Because now, if you see the kids starting at school, it's going dramatically down. You have to shut down schools, and that is part of our future. Because I want my kids to grow up in Finnmark, to have the possibility to live in a region that's massive when it comes to culture. Regarding the clan culture, the Sami culture, and the Norwegian culture. It's a melting pot. And it's a part of my tradition, and it's a part of my history. But if we don't create the jobs of tomorrow, and we think that we should stop now, we have it, everything is fine, let's do what we did yesterday. And so we have to change, and we have to keep being in front of our shoe tips so that we can move forward. And that's how we get more people to Finnmark. And that is important for the nation of Norway, that we have the security that we need against the border to Russia.
Okay, thank you so much for now. Then we will open up for questions from you in the audience. Just raise a hand and please address who you are asking in the panel. I think I saw you first.
Thank you. Thank you for fascinating talks and the debate. In practice, implementing green energy projects will require larger numbers of engineers and technicians to maintain that infrastructure. Where will Norway find those people? And is there any plans to train people locally in the north to take those technical roles, or will you import them from somewhere else?
Who are you asking?
Everyone, I think, actually.
Okay, we start with the mayor.
It's on. Firstly, the last couple of weeks, big entrepreneurs in Finnmark has gone bankrupt. So the people are there, the companies are there, but the work isn't there. So you need to get big projects starting, and then you can. There's wind power is one thing, sea farming, land-based sea farming is another. But of course, the people are there, and they need jobs.
Do they have the right technical qualifications?
Not everything, but you need to also educate the people for the future, and that's also part of the solution.
Anyone else? Holseter?
So that particular issue has been on the forefront for years, and LO and NHO quite a few years back undertook a study to estimate the employment impact of either new industry or new power production and similar. And I'm a trained electrician from the 80s, so I know what it's like to string a wire. I got higher education later on. That type of approach where we look at what sectors we need, so they could be process operators, welders, and so on, we need to get that number up there. And unless there's an industry there, they're not going to find work. And so you couple your educational needs with the industries you want. You can't let it be whatever it is. You need to have a clear policy. This is what we want, and we can supply the labor for it. And yes, some of that will be imported.
Please.
Yeah, so also there, I think it's important to look at synergies. Let's say oil and gas is an industry that will not last for so long. There's a lot of well-paid, good skilled workers there. There we see that there are some politicians in Norway who think there are synergies with floating offshore wind. And there are also what we see from many of the oil service companies is that there are a lot of also synergies with nuclear energy. Let's say a nuclear reactor, you have 5% nuclear physics, and the rest is just process engineering and system thinking and complexity and so on. All the types of systems that these companies are expert in. So even though if we don't allow nuclear energy in Norway, it's actually a lot of the oil service companies now that are preparing to deliver into the nuclear energy in the future. So to look at synergies with sectors that we want to decrease, and let these people allow to use their skills in new sectors that are clean and more nature friendly. That I think is a key.
Yeah, sure. I think this is one of the biggest possible showstoppers for the green transition in Norway. And it's under-communicated, I believe. And that's why I'm sure that there is a real conflict between the oil and gas sector, which brings up the salaries and attracts the most clever people, and the rest of the Norwegian economy. And that's why also I'm hesitating that Norway should be active in developing nuclear industry, because I think that will also attract competence from other areas. That doesn't mean that we should reject nuclear power in Norway, but I think there's a role, different roles for different countries. And also, we have politicians have very difficult to say no. And you have several projects in my region, in this region, when it comes to infrastructure, Nordlandsbanen, Hordfast. I can mention several projects. We have so many engineers working on those projects that will never see the light of the day, but we're wasting resources on the way. So we should just be honest and say that those projects will never be realized. Spend the resources on other kind of activities in the economy.
Okay, thank you. Let's have a new question from the audience. Yes.
Thank you for your remarkable presentations. Really well thought through, coherent, and with contradictions that have to be addressed in some manner or other. My question, I have two-part question, if I may. So the first is in the context of $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund that comes primarily from oil and gas, what happens? Where does that go? And in the context of a transition, what are the gaps in terms of jobs and communities? And in the context of the transition, as pointed out, what about indigenous lands and the potential sacrifice being required by people who have fought very hard for thousands of years to live in a subsistence manner for those who do? And the biodiversity element as well, when you look at all of the elements starting from the micro level to the human and all that is so finely integrated together, what happens to that? So that's sort of you've addressed much of it, but just to synopsize, if you will. And if I may, I have a question specific to Svalbard, where I did spend some time in writing about their transition from coal to green energy, which is I've never seen anything quite like it in the extraordinary, thought through way, and what it is that they have and what it is they don't have, and what has to be constructed, and how are they going to save power? I forgot the word battery. Is this dynamic something that you all look at or draw from or criticize in that context? Thank you very much for a remarkable session.
Okay, anyone who would like to try? What's that?
Make a stab at it. That was a very broad question when it goes from the biota all the way up to the atmosphere. But what I think is important, 15 years ago, I was at a science conference in either New York or in Pennsylvania somewhere, and I learned that POPs, persistent organic pollutants, traveling from the US, you can actually see what factory it's from that we find in Svalbard and vice versa. So when it comes to how we address the encompassing issues with biodiversity and all that, that is a cross-boundary issue. And that's why you have Arctic conferences, because we suffer more than other people, in particular for those pollutants and from the effects of climate change. So I do believe, though, that most of your issues are being dealt with at the science level, at universities, at think tanks, and so on. So that's the best answer I can give.
Thank you so much. And then I think time is up for now. Give a big hand to the panel, please. And have a nice day.